Our previous videos were looking at the research process, and let's start to dive into different types of research methods and their corresponding designs. In this particular set of videos, we're going to be looking at secondary data. So it's important to differentiate between secondary data and primary data. Secondary data is data that has been previously collected. The idea here is that data was collected for some other purpose. It could be that your organization collected this information. Maybe it's coming from your employee records management. Maybe it's coming from your client database. Maybe it's information in terms of processes within the organization, so policies and documents. Maybe it's documents you collect as part of your operations, right? In terms of what happens each day, who's involved, how much gets made, things like that. So data previously collected, it doesn't matter what purpose it was previously collected for, but if it was previously collected and you're using it now in your research, then it is secondary data. Now, it could have been collected by you, your organization, or it could have been collected by a different organization. So you can go and get other data, information that people have collected for a different purpose, and then you analyze it, make recommendations for your purposes. You can buy data, and also if it's government funded. So for example, we'll look at some examples in the US. If the US government helped pay for in grants some of this data collection, then it becomes available for everyone else. And so you might be able to analyze the data they collected and use it for another purpose. So that's secondary data, data that's been previously collected, as opposed to primary data, which is new data, which is gathered to solve the problem under investigation. So if you're collecting data specific to your research problem, then it's primary data. If you're using data that someone collected for some other purpose, then it is secondary data. So why would you be using secondary data? Well, you might want to collect information about what is happening in the political environment, in the economic environment, to better understand the context in which you're making a decision. We also know from our previous videos that you might be doing some exploration to better understand the problem at hand, the context, the issue around it as you're trying to develop your research problem. So you're trying to go from management issues, business issues, organizational issues, or opportunities into something that can be researched. And so you're using that secondary data to help you better understand what have others done in this situation before, what is the environment that we're experiencing this issue. And it's very important to know the political and economic environment in which you are making decisions. For example, I'm just going to turn on this little clip here. So this here is a breaking news video that we see here, and we'll just play for a couple seconds here, but you can see that you see all the cops coming in, and the issue here is there was a device that was spotted on this billboard that people thought was a bomb, and it turns out that it was simply a guerrilla marketing campaign. So guerrilla marketing is where you don't pay for advertising. You do something that puts you in front of the news. And so others are basically advertising on your behalf. And see, somewhere here is so here you can see some of the icons. There was, I don't know if it's in here somewhere. But it basically was just a light up display related to advertising a TV network. And when people saw it, the problem is they thought, oh, that, what is that box that's lighting up? It must be a bomb, and created quite a stir. Well, context matters, right? So understanding the political and economic environment at the time and that this is a couple years after 9/11. People were quite concerned about terrorist activities, and so that environment really wasn't conducive to the type of advertising and promotions that the company was using. And so it kind of had a negative impact. Not the positive one that they expected, by trying to take advantage of the fact that it would stir up talk and they wouldn't have to pay for the advertising campaign. So secondary data analysis can help us understand the context in which we're making decisions, help us know that political and economic environment that we're making the decision in, help us see what others might have done before. What type of information do you get from secondary data? So we might be getting information about what's happening with the population, the demographics of the population. So we can look at information from our city, from our province, from the federal government that looks at population growth, density, demographics of the population in terms of age, ethnic background. We can look at migration patterns in terms of where are people coming from as they move in. We can get secondary data that looks at what's happening in terms of the business environment, the labor force, the unemployment rate, the industries, job growth. We can get other types of economic data, which include like housing starts, what's happening with taxes. We could look at what's happening with people's income. We could collect information about changes in regulations, laws, taxes, licensing, zoning that might inform the decisions for an organization. We can look at information related to our supply chain in terms of costs, transport, logistics costs in terms of different ways we can transport, rail, water, air. And we can look at information about the competition. When it comes to secondary data, you can purchase information about industry trends, what's happening in terms of demand for your particular product or services, what's happening in terms of the competition. There is also assessments in terms of what is happening in general in terms of barriers to trade, changes in customs and politics. And so you can buy information that others have collected about the environment in which you're making your decisions. So if you are a company that's looking at treatments to increase the amount of yield for your wheat, you can look at what's happening in terms of regulations on pesticides, in terms of environmental restrictions, in terms of legal and political leanings. You can get that kind of information to impact that decision, impact in terms of if you're in the health sciences and you're looking at funding for medical procedures, billing costs, things like that, you can get that data to show what is the typical cost for different types of procedures. You can collect information in terms of effectiveness of different drugs and treatments, right? Studies conducted by others to help inform you in your decisions. That is secondary data. When it comes to the secondary data, it can be from internal. So an internal database is a collection of related info developed within the organization. So as I said, this might be information about your clients, about your processes, about your employees. So a collection of related info developed within the organization. External databases, we can get information from marketing research aggregators. So they pull information from lots of different sources. There are companies that do research, right? And so we can buy the results of their research projects. There might be trade and industry associations that are providing information about trends. There's the government databases, as I said, like in the US. If the government funds part of your research, then that data becomes available. And then there's non-government databases as well. So over the next videos, we'll look at these different external databases. Before we do that though, let's just define what it means to do data mining. Data mining is the use of statistical and other advanced software. My goodness. My brain and my hands don't match. Use of statistical and other advanced software to discover non-obvious patterns hidden in the data. So later we're going to have videos where we're going to do some data mining. We're going to use machine learning to find those patterns. There are classification methods, cluster analysis. So we'll use AI and machine learning to do this data mining. But one step at a time. First, we're developing our research design process. We'll talk a bit about some intro stats, and then we'll get into our machine learning AI, data mining, and then expand to other types of data beyond just information in a database. So we'll get there. When we use data mining, we can determine which customers are most likely to pay bills, which customers are more likely to leave and go to a competitor, which ones are going to turn into long-term champions for our organization, what are some common characteristics for our clients. Certain people we work with prefer certain services, and so we can find those patterns in the data through the process of data mining. So we want to go through the information and find those patterns, and so we will have videos on those processes. For the next couple of videos, though, we're just going to focus on some external data sources, and then later on we'll get into analyzing those data that's collected, secondary data that was collected by others. When it comes to data mining, there are potential uses. Just a basic summary here before we dive in deeper much later, which is the potential uses of data mining are acquisition, retention, and abandonment. So in acquisition, identifying characteristics of the future customer or client. Retention, identifying ways to increase our client satisfaction, opportunities to provide more services or products to current clientele. And then abandonment, customers that no longer purchase from us, clients who no longer come see us, particular groups or cohorts, target markets that no longer engage with us, suppliers, like if we have issues with failed payments from, or issues, flagging those issues where there is that abandonment or the end of that relationship. So who are these individuals or organizations? What do they have in common that would lead to that failed relationship? So we can use data mining for acquisition, retention, and abandonment.